Hello. All right, good. Sound check. Sound check.
Hello. What a beautiful Monday. Hello. Shimmy. It's party time. It's excellent. Wayne's World. Oh, welcome. Time to grade the cheese. Time to grade the cheese. We are going to grade the cheese. Yes, we are indeed. It's 7 o'clock. It's Monday night. It's time for Back of the House. We gotta work on that. All right, so today we are going to start by grating some Pecorino Romano cheese. This is all going to be going into our meatballs and our lasagna. Gotta grate all the cheese, gotta grate all the cheese. So we have our grated pecorino. Put that up there. Next we are going to grate our mozzarella cheese. I think I need to get some of... Hey, what's going on, man? How are you doing today? Sorry, trying to rearrange my microphone so it stops bugging me. All right. See what we got going on. Welcome to the first viewer. It's a pleasure to have you tonight, Force Dragon. So, tell you what we're starting off with tonight. I was thinking about stuff I could do, and I realized I still had tomato sauce left over. That delicious tomato basil sauce. I realized I still had that left over. I realized I had some of that porchetta from last night that we ate it. It was delicious, but now I'm going to turn it all into a tomato sauce to actually make lasagna with. So it's going to be pretty exciting. Oh, I can only imagine going snowboarding when you haven't done it before, because I've never done it before. And I would imagine that you're using parts of your body that you completely forget about. So, but yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just kind of getting some of my mise en place ready. So I'm going to start grating my cheeses, getting some of that out of the way. Basically just getting a lot of my ingredients together. I think that's going to work out better in the long run if I get a lot of my ingredients together ahead of time, but wait a minute. You made pita bread? Did you make pita bread? If you made pita bread, that's actually very impressive. Welcome to everybody who's coming in. Welcome to Back of the House. Good to have everybody on this Monday. Hope everybody's Monday was bearable. All right. Just grating up some fresh mozzarella here. Wow. I mean, just the fact that you even made pita bread, that alone is noteworthy. So, congratulations. I'm very proud of you. All right. So, grated up our cheese. We've got some of our tomato sauce going. So, the first thing we're going to do is make our tomato sauce and actually expand the tomato sauce that I have left, because right now I have a good amount of tomato sauce, but I'm not going to have enough to actually make my full pan of lasagna. Okay, so because of that, we're actually going to doctor the tomato sauce I have up a little bit and kind of turn it into a red wine braised meat sauce. We're going to use the porchetta that I made last night, and we're also going to use a little bit of mild Italian sausage, and then I'm going to make some homemade meatballs, and we're going to kind of cook all that together and then use that to layer into the lasagna. So we're going to go ahead and get going right now. Might as well. So I'm going to start by dicing up an onion, because we're making more tomato sauce, which means I am going to be using some tomatoes that haven't been cooked. So we're basically going to make like a mini version of our tomato basil sauce, but this one is also going to be flavored with a little bit of tomato paste and red wine. The reason for that is I want a deeper, richer flavor. I want it to have a deeper, richer flavor than just the basic tomato basil sauce. Your basic tomato basil or marinara sauce, the whole point of it is to actually be a light tomato sauce. You know, you actually want it to be something that is very nice on pasta, which, you know, what we're making now is nice on pasta, but for lasagna, you want a little bit more structure to the sauce. You want it to be cooked down a little bit more. You want it to be just a little bit richer. So I am going to dice up an onion and just start sweating that first. Go ahead and turn my pot on back here. Get this guy up front. Oh, it's going to be an amazing lasagna. And it's going to be me and my bro's food for a couple days, so it's going to be good. So a quick revisit, of course, as I always want to do, on dicing an onion. So I did the first half just kind of like my normal style. So don't forget, you want to make sure that you locate the root end, okay? And you want to start on the opposite end, so not the root end. The root end is actually what's going to hold the onion together. So then you're going to make your cuts up the onion. And in the beginning, you can only make 1 or 2 cuts and you're fine. It depends on how much you actually want to dice it, how fine you want to get the dice. But so I make just, you know, two slices, and then you go down the line and not making sure not to cut all the way through. I only cut this to about, I mean, you can actually see the onion actually holds up, but I only cut the onion to about there. So it still leaves a little bit of room for the stem to hold together so it doesn't fall apart, and you get that beautiful dice. All right. So since I have my avocado oil back, I'll go ahead and use it for this. Keep it nice and healthy. Put a good amount on the bottom of the pan for us to sweat those onions out. Make them nice and translucent. And then I have a good amount of garlic in there. So I kind of, I'm trying to think about how much garlic I'm going to use. I'm going to just cut up maybe about 6 cloves, because we're going to need some to make our meatballs with as well. So I'll see what's on the rest of this bulb right here. As always, please, if you can, use fresh garlic. You will just be so shocked and amazed at the flavor of fresh garlic in comparison to the jarred garlic that they have. Jarred garlic that's pre-chopped has lost a lot of its flavor, and it's gained a lot of its bad flavor. That kind of, what's the word? Not pneumonia, but acrid, I guess would be a good word. Flavor. I will go ahead and take my onions and put them in my pot back here. Start getting them going. Start building the base of flavors. What we're doing is we're setting up a base in Flavortown. Base of operations. Onions are the base of operations of the culinary world. I actually like that. I think that kind of makes sense. They're where everything kind of starts, which is kind of funny when I run into people with onion allergies, because that has just gotta suck. Alright. That garlic's got a little rough spot on it. I'll just cut that out. That's fine. I also make sure that I take off that little root end. Nothing wrong with the root. It's not going to hurt you. It's just not very appetizing. Picked up another viewer. Welcome, whoever just came in. Good to have you. Ooh, a little rough part on that garlic, too. It's all right. Not every garlic clove can be perfect. Sticky garlic. It's a pain in the butt, but man, is it worth it. And it's good for you, too. Good for your digestion. That's why the Italians live so long and the Greeks. Garlic. Healthy living. They walk everywhere. I was so fit when I lived in Italy. Holy crap. That was far and away the most athletic I think I ever was, because I just walked and ran everywhere. It was awesome. There were many, many modern conveniences that they don't have over there, but my God, is it beautiful. All right. Give them a stir, just make sure they're all coated with oil. So I'm going to chop up this garlic and then I'll probably use half for the tomato sauce, half for the meatballs. So when I'm chopping this garlic, I'm just going to take my knife and run it through it real quick. Italy, yeah. So I lived in Italy for about a year. No, not a year. I'm sorry, about 8 months. I actually did my second to last semester in college. I have a BA from Florida State in classical civilizations. I did my second to last semester abroad in Italy, but I was cooking over there most of the time anyway, because I already knew I wanted to go to culinary school. So I was living in Florence at the time. It was awesome. It was a great experience. That's really when I developed a really amazing passion for Italian food and just how they prepare it, and just the way that they're. Until you either visit there a couple times or live there, as I did, you don't really fully understand their love of food and how they approach it and how it's kind of a centerpiece of their everyday life. It's everything to them. It's amazing. So it gives you a real big respect for it. So we got our garlic there. We got our onions. Trying to make sure that they're not going to brown. That might be up a little bit high right now. If these do brown a little bit, it's not the biggest deal, because, this is going to be a tomato sauce for a lasagna. So having to be a little roasted, a little caramelized, it's not the worst thing in the world. All right, so we've got our onions starting to cook. Now, I am actually going to turn this off for a minute. Let those onions continue to sweat because I want to make the meatballs right now. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few pieces You can really do this either way. You can either do this with, I mean, I have a little bit of whole wheat bread here. That's perfectly fine. It could be white bread. It really doesn't matter. But you do need some kind of bread to soak in milk for meatballs. So the idea behind meatballs and the idea behind the Italian idea behind meatballs is they used to make meatballs and they used to use the bread for multiple reasons, but the main one was meat was very expensive and there was no way that they were going to put that much meat into their meatballs. They just couldn't afford it. So I'm just going to soak these 2 slices of milk in that bread there for a minute. Soak the milk in the bread. Soak the bread in the milk. Backwards, frontwards. So they would stretch it with bread, but it also gives the meatballs much more moisture. Okay, so that's really going to improve the moisture level of the meatball. So here, we're going to be using some ground sirloin. All right. Oh, and actually, since I'm going to be doing this, I can actually do a couple things at once. I will go ahead and take my onions out here and actually start browning my sausage in that same pot. I'm going to try to do all of this in one pot. I want to do all of this in one pot. I want all this flavor. Now, I did this in the wrong order, quite honestly. I forgot that I wanted to sear my sausage in here before I actually started my onions. So if you do that, guess what? Not a big deal. Always remember that about cooking. It's very easy to fix most of the time. I'm not going to say all the time, but most things in the culinary world can be fixed. I think the main job of a chef in a kitchen is pretty much to be able to fix anything whenever anybody asks you to, because everybody's going to ask you to. Actually, I do an 80-20 fat content on the sirloin. I actually like that amount of fat in the meatballs. I'm not one to worry about fat content in meats and good quality oils and things like that, because these things are actually relatively good for you. You know, I'm not saying that you want to go out there and eat beef fat all the time, but it's definitely, it's not going to hurt you in this, and it's going to give the meatballs a really beautiful moisture. I'm going to need some parsley in a minute. Grab my sausages. So I'm just using some mild Italian sausage. And I want to sear these and cook them most of the way, actually. I'm going to have a few onions in there searing. That's fine. It's not going to hurt it. But I want to sear these and cook them most of the way so that I'll be able to slice them and actually layer them inside the lasagna. So over here, we're going to have our fresh garlic. My bread soaked in milk here. So this is not going to take very long. And I just kind of squeeze a good amount of that milk out and then put the rest of the bread in there, and we're just going to mix it in a minute. Next flavoring agent for the meatballs is going to be some pecorino cheese that I've grated up. Pretty good amount. And then I'm going to take a little bit of Italian flat leaf parsley. Chop it up and put it in there. Parsley's for a little bit of earthy, peppery flavor that it imparts, but also so there's a little bit of green in there. It looks nice in the meatball. We're going to add a little bit to the lasagna too, so there's little specks of green in there. Got to make it seem a little bit healthy, you know? Parsley. Sausages are cooking out nicely. I'm going for my eggs. There they are. So to this mixture, I'm probably going to add 2 eggs. The eggs are going to act as a binder for everything. Kind of help the meatballs stay together in the cooking process so it doesn't turn into ground beef. All right, so next, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and we're going to mix these guys up. And you don't have to worry about over mixing this. You're not going to stiffen it or anything like that. You know, I am trying to make sure that I get everything pretty well combined. Sometimes you can hold the bowl and almost use your hand like a whisk. That's what we'll do in the kitchen there. Because you do actually want to work these a little bit, because you're going to see the meatballs, the dough is actually going to start getting a little bit sticky and tacky. That's actually what you want right there. So we have our sausages searing over here. We have our meatball mixture over here. Looking for my tongs. There they are. Just going to check on our sausages, see how they're doing. So that's what you want to see right there. Nice golden brown. Yeah. Line those guys up. Now I can go ahead and start getting my meatballs ready for searing. So, one thing to kind of remember about meatballs, and I guess one thing to remember about... Darn, I thought I had a pocket there. Sure. So one thing this thing was just killing me. One thing to remember about meatballs is the wetter they are, the more moist they're going to be. Okay, so the one thing you want to do is you want to be able to actually form them into a ball, but you don't want them so tight that you're not able to actually, like, the tighter the meatball, the drier it's going to be. So as long as I can do that and kind of make myself a little meatball like that, that's good for me. You know, we're going to sear these guys, and they're going to be pretty large seared meatballs because I'm actually going to want to slice these and layer them into the lasagna. Making meatballs. Making meatballs. Just so relaxing. Welcome to everyone who's coming in. Welcome, welcome. We're making some meatballs that are going to go into our lasagna. I have some sausage searing back there on the stove, getting nice and browned and beautiful for us to slice up. All right. So our sausages are looking lovely. Now these, I'm just getting the sear in the bottom of the pan. And there's a couple different options that you can do with this. You can either finish poaching these sausages in the tomato sauce that we're going to make. You could finish roasting them in the oven. But we are going to use this pan right here to also sear our meatballs. If you can ever, for the most part, if you can ever cook everything in the same pot and keep searing things, you're just building layers of flavor. All right, so I'm just going to layer these guys in there. I have my heat on about medium right now. I'm not trying to blast these too hard. And we're just trying to sear the outside of them. And same thing as with the sausages. You can finish cooking these in a few different ways. Either in the oven, in the actual sauce. But right now we're just layering flavor in there. He said, "Is this online?" Yeah, it's online. I am currently cooking. So here are those onions that we started with. And we'll get back to those in a minute. I have my can of San Marzano tomatoes here that we're going to be using. At least he looks like a chef. Yeah, it's true. I'm fat and I'm wearing a chef's jacket. Check and check. All right, so we're going to come back here and so those are going to keep cooking, searing. going to take them a minute to get good color. Depends on where they are in my pan too and how hot they are. But I'll just go in here and start seeing how they're turning. I need a little bit more. You're studying the cooking university, watching the market. Cool. Because of the amount of cheese and everything in these, they are going to have a tendency to stick. That's okay. Crank this heat up a little bit so they start getting a little bit more of a sear on it. Everything is tapas. See, that's really funny because all American food has is tapas. Everybody eats tapas nowadays. I think a few of the restaurants I've opened, you know, the primary focus of it was tapas style food. Just trying to get a nice golden brown there. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about doing a tapas restaurant or any kind of like a small plates restaurant in the United States or anywhere is small plates actually tend to make people want to buy more things. So you actually end up increasing your check average a lot of the time, which is not something a lot of people think about when they start a tapas restaurant. But it's if you do it correctly, you can definitely make a little bit of money at it, you know. So like I said, these meatballs are going to be they're going to be soft. They'll firm up as they cook more and more, but in the beginning they will be very soft, so you want to be extra careful with them. Well, yeah, Americans do. Americans most certainly think it's for free, right? Wait, that's not free? No, I don't want it. If you're stopping by and like what you see, please hit that follow button for me. Be greatly appreciated. Yeah. Yeah, that's like Fogo de Chao and stuff like that. That's actually really I've actually never really eaten at those places, but I mean I hear they're really good. So we got our meatballs simmering, simmering, simmering. I'm gonna grab one of my spatulas here so I can get this last meatball up. Nice. So as I get these meatballs seared, I'm going to bring them over here and pop them in my pan with my sausage, because I'm just going to probably pop this whole thing in the oven to cook a little bit more. Because none of this stuff is really cooked right now. But I have enough flavor in that pan, so I don't really need to worry about getting any more flavor in there. I've already got all these nice ghibli bits to work with, you know. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. So we're just going to pop this in our oven and let all that meat start to roast together. Now we're going to add our onions back in. All right. And then we will be adding, and I always forget where I put it, my tomato paste. Ah ha ha. So we're going to add a little bit of tomato paste to this, and we're going to start caramelizing that tomato paste. Remember, whenever you cook with tomato paste, you really want to caramelize that in there. It helps to build those flavors really beautifully. Do you eat snails in America? Yeah, some people do. I love our escargot. I mean, I love it in a lot of different ways too. So after our tomato paste caramelizes for probably 30 seconds to a minute, we're going to add a little bit of red wine to it. We're going to take a second. I'm going to kind of center in on this over here right now, since that's what we're working on. Yeah, they're definitely not common. So next, we are going to be deglazing with red wine. Red wine. So I'm going to be using Cabernet Sauvignon for this. You know, you want something relatively light. Don't go crazy, but you want to make sure you have something that is also something you would be wanting to drink as well. And that's probably about a cup and a half of red wine. And we're just going to start using that red wine to start scraping up all that. And I'm actually going to get my spatula over here because I actually want to go in there and start scraping up everything off the bottom of the pot. So all that pork that we seared, all that beef that we seared, it's finishing off in the oven right now. All that's concentrating in flavor right there. So now we're going to want to let this reduce out for probably about a minute or two. You know, you want to let that strong wine flavor cook out because you always just want the flavor of the wine. You don't actually want the alcohol in it. No, we do eat snails in America. I mean, don't get us wrong here. We eat snails in America, but it's not a very common dish. And generally, when it's prepared, it's prepared in a French style in America. But being that I lived in Italy and everything. So we're going to let that keep cooking for another minute or so. Then I'm going to be adding in my can of San Marzano tomatoes. And then I also have my tomato basil sauce that we had made about a week ago that I had frozen. Oh, for bull's tails? Nice. Yeah? Or oxtails. Yeah, I call them oxtails. But yeah, this is a very good braise for oxtails. Any kind of red wine tomato braise is very good for oxtails. Oxtails are something we'll definitely do on the stream at some point. I love oxtails. So So now that that's reduced down a little bit, starting to get a little syrupy, I'm going to let that go just a little bit more. Yeah, so when traditionally when I make oxtails, I do use a mirepoix, so I use carrots, onions, and celery. I've done oxtails a bunch of different ways. They're really delicious. They're very rich in fat. They're so fatty. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hand crush in my San Marzano tomatoes. All right. Pour in the rest of my tomatoes and tomato sauce. Make sure you get all that out of there. And then I'm going to add in my tomato basil sauce. And I'm going to let all that start to cook down together. Unfortunately, my tomato basil sauce hadn't fully unfrozen, so it's going to take a minute for that to cook out of there, but that's fine. Yeah. Hey, man, if you want to send me oxtails from Spain and you can get it to Atlanta, Georgia, I mean, we do have a pretty big airport, so it's extremely possible. All right, so one thing I can go ahead and add to this is I have a few leftover pieces of our porchetta from yesterday. We have eaten the rest of it, it looks like. Too good. So I'm going to take the porchetta and I'm just going to chunk it up into nice pieces. And I'm actually just going to drop that right into the tomato sauce to cook in there and keep giving it a little bit more flavor. All right. This is kind of savage, but I'm going to take a knife and just kind of start breaking up the rest of that frozen tomato sauce so it cooks in a little bit faster. There we go. It was pretty well unthawed, actually. It just had to be broken up a bit. Now, I'm making a lot of tomato sauce again, so if I have extra of this, I can once again freeze it and then just use it later. At this point, you can't really do much more with this sauce aside from use it in something like lasagna or put it over rigatoni or something like that, but it is a phenomenal meat sauce. I'm going to check our meatballs and sausage in here. A little bit more. I feel like that fat guy off of Goodfellas. No, not Goodfellas. Godfather. You know, and he's like, and he's making the tomato sauce. If anybody has ever seen The Godfather, they know that scene. It's one of the greatest food scenes when he talks about making tomato sauce. Tells Al Pacino how it's done. All right. Next, we're going to start getting start teaching you a little bit about blanching. So blanching vegetables is something that we do in restaurants because it imparts flavor into the vegetable. It allows you to season it from the inside out, and it also helps set the beautiful green color of vegetables. So it's something that I wanted to show you, and also something that I wanted to make a little video of, because it is an extremely important cooking method. And we are all about cooking method here, because that is how you get better. So here's the fun part of going through and cleaning your green beans. Now, I am not nearly as much of a stickler, I think, as many people. So I really just want to get that woody end off. You know, some of them actually have it off already, but I'll just gather up 5 or 6 at a time, take off a little bit of that off the top. Like I said, I mean, you can even eat it. It's not going to hurt you, but it will be mildly unappetizing. So. And I'm going to be cooking off a lot of vegetables because I can store these vegetables after I blanch them, and they're good for upwards of 5 days. You can keep them in the fridge, and the nice thing is they're going to be, you know, like 3/4 of the way cooked. So really, all you have to do is throw them in the oven for a minute or pan sear them. It really depends how much you've cooked them by what you're going to do with them afterwards, but it is a nice thing to have if you want to use fresh vegetables as opposed to buying the frozen cooked vegetables. And if you ever get a recipe that tells you to blanch something, this is what you do. Let's come back here and check on my sauce. I got this turned up pretty much to high right now because I want to try to get this simmering. I'm going to go ahead and pull my huge pot of meat out to let that start relaxing before we add it into our sauce. I also, while I'm thinking about it, so blanching the vegetables like we're going to do requires salted boiling water. And when you season it, you kind of want to season it like you season pasta water, where you want it to taste like the ocean. Because you need a lot of that salt flavor. Almost there. It is just so much fun cleaning green beans. All right. Yes, they are quite tedious, but they're very tasty. They're pretty worth it. All right, so our tomato sauce is starting to simmer nicely. That has that little chunks of pork in there right now. Basically just doing my prep work right now on my vegetables. I'm not going to be cooking them quite yet. Woo! I'm going to have to find a better place for this. See if I can make that work again. All right. Green beans. We're going to blanch off some asparagus. Everybody's favorite. And yes, it does make your pee smell, but that happens. So the way you know where to actually break the asparagus, the general rule is you try to hold it pretty evenly and just kind of bend it. And wherever it snaps at, that's where you want to actually take the asparagus down to. That part of it is going to be woodier. That's just kind of a real, I don't know what the word would be. I guess the word would be urban legend. I don't know. That's not even a single word. That's multiple words. But I'll use that as a guide for the rest. Now, these stems down here, some of it might be edible, but as the stem gets thicker and thicker, it gets woodier and woodier. Okay, so any asparagus larger than this, I might actually peel because it's going to make it a lot better, a lot more tender. All right. Other vegetables that we will be blanching is some baby broccoli, broccolini. The stems are nice, but I do cut them down a little bit just so they're even. There we go. So much easier than the green beans. So much easier. All right. And this is actually the pan that I'm going to be using for my lasagna too, which is totally cool. All right. Water's coming to a boil. So like I said, these meatballs, they're super moist when they're that wet when you're cooking them. It makes them a little bit harder to cook, no doubt, but the flavor that you get out of it is infinitely better. So the next thing that I can mix, clean my big bowl out. The next thing that I'm going to mix is actually going to be our ricotta cheese mixture for the lasagna. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move my vegetables out of the way for now. I am going to go ahead and dry that bowl out. As much as possible, you don't want any excess water anywhere while you're cooking. So, ricotta cheese. Ricotta means twice cooked in Italian. So, ricotta cheese is actually very simple to make. It's a combination of half and half and cream that you actually acidulate, that you'll break it, which is how you get those little curds of cheese. But you actually break it with some kind of vinegar or lemon juice. But yeah, it's actually extremely easy to make. But for this amount, I didn't really feel like going through the process to make it. It's easy to make, but it's time consuming. So that actually should explain it a little bit better. So this is 32 ounces. I'm going to need about half of this. And you can do a lot of different things with ricotta cheese. It's very popular in Italian desserts. You know, you can sweeten it up very easily, and it's very nice, creamy. All right, so that's looking like a nice, rich meat sauce. Now, I do want to go ahead and cook this down for about 30 minutes because I want to evaporate out as much of that liquid as possible. I want it to be a very condensed and reduced tomato sauce to go into the lasagna. You don't want it to be super wet or runny. So here, we're going to add in some of our fresh mozzarella cheese. Some of our pecorino romano. Some shredded Parmesan cheese. And then we're going to need 2 eggs as a binder. And when it bakes, it helps to set the lasagna and actually give the lasagna some that happens. You know, everybody does it differently. I can't give them too much crap. But this is how you should tell them to actually do it. All right. So then we're going to add, there's a lot of salts in there already, but I will add just a touch. And then I'm going to add a good amount of cracked black pepper. So the last thing I'm going to add is a little bit more of our Italian flat leaf parsley. Just tear off a little bit. You notice I don't go through and individually pick off all of these leaves. I don't think it's worth it. I think you can chop it up finely enough without having to deal with that. Yeah, you lose a ton of flavor like that. Searing things is really what brings about so much flavor. Let's keep chopping up our parsley here. I'm going to go ahead and mix this up. This is kind of the glue for your lasagna. I'm actually going to go ahead and add in a little bit more. Add in a little bit more mozzarella. I think I'm going to add in one more egg just to be sure we got a good binder. Yeah, that looks better. I wanted it to be a little bit wetter from the egg. All right. So that looks nice. Come back here and just stirring. I'll bring my pan over here and start cutting up our meat, getting that all ready for the, kind of getting all of our stages of the lasagna ready so that we can have it completely ready to put together once the sauce is done cooking. Unless I lose all of my... There we go. All right. Let's brush this into my sink real quick. I'm going to turn this down to low back here just so I don't let it evaporate out too much. I will have to probably add a touch more water, but we're starting to have to focus on the lasagna a little bit. So for the sausage, I just want to cut nice slices out of it. And you can still see a little pink in the middle, but it's mostly cooked, which is fine, because when we're cooking the lasagna, you want to make sure for the lasagna that everything that goes into it is already cooked, okay? You don't want to have uncooked product going into your lasagna, because really the whole point of the baking process is just to cook everything together, all right? So you want everything pretty well cooked before you put it in there. And the meatballs, I'm actually going to just kind of probably tear in half and dot throughout the entirety of the lasagna. All right. Clean our cutting board real quick. So we got our cheese mixture, we got our meats. So when it comes to the pasta sheets that I use for this, I actually prefer to use the oven-ready lasagna sheets. If you want to go through the hassle of par cooking your lasagna noodles, feel free. But these give you a pretty doggone good texture. And for the ease of use, I actually greatly prefer them. So. Looking nice. So as far as a cooking vessel for this, I could use the pot there, the pan that I have right there, but I actually have 2 pans that really will do the trick for this. I am going to scrub this one out real quick, but the size lasagna that I'll be making is about a 9 by 12 pan. And actually, I like the look of this pan more, so I'm actually just going to switch pans. So you'll see as the tomato sauce is cooking, the moisture on the top keeps evaporating out a little bit more and more, and it continues to reduce and thicken. That's really what we're looking for. It's going to take this one, 15 minutes, 20 more minutes. The nice thing is you can layer the lasagna while it's still hot, while the sauce is still hot, so you don't have to worry about having to cool that down before you actually make the lasagna. All right. It's a low viewership night tonight, boys. That is okay. Oh, tomato sauce is so dirty. Bubbles up everywhere. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do one little round of blanching right now. I think I'll have enough time to do it. I'll probably do some of my broccolini. Now, one thing I am going to get ready is a container. Trying to figure out what container I can use for actually... Oh, you know what? I figured it out. So I'm going to make myself a little ice bath here. So whenever you're blanching vegetables, you're going to submerge them in the boiling salted water, cook them, and then you're going to shock them in what I call an ice bath, which is just ice and water. And the reason for shocking it is it immediately stops the or the cooking process rather. And it also sets the chlorophyll, especially in green vegetables. So that's almost back to a boil. You want to make sure that your water is at a rolling boil when you start doing this. It is very important. So I'll go ahead and do some of this broccolini first. Take one of these bunches. It's almost back to what I consider a rolling boil. I'm just going to add that right in there. And the cooking time obviously is going to vary depending on the vegetable. You can always pull it out, taste it. You know, if you're just looking to set the chlorophyll in it and you just want it to get that nice bright green, I could just take it out right now, for example, and shock it, and it would set the chlorophyll in it. But I actually do want to cook it a little bit more, because if I blanch it, then later on I can roast it, I can saute it, I can really do whatever I want with it. Bring it over there, put in my ice bath. So you can see that just from about 30 seconds of blanching, it softens it a little bit and it sets that really beautiful green color. So now that it's come back to a boil, I'll just come back over here, grab the rest of my broccolini. Go ahead and drop that in there. Doing multiple things at once, fun stuff. There's still some crackliness. Hold on. Is that any better? Hopefully it's better. Still trying to figure out how to get this thing to sit properly. Oh, cool. Great. Turn it off and on. All right, so same thing. It's in there for about 30 seconds to a minute. Go ahead and pull it out, hit it in my ice water. Let that come back to a boil, then I'll do my asparagus. And so the cool thing is I'm doing all this, and I'm just going to put this back into my pan up here, and I'm just going to wrap that whole pan up and put it in my fridge, and then I'll have vegetables to eat for the next 3 or 4 days. Really simple, just saute it, and I'll do a couple little quick methods of preparation for green vegetables like this, but this is continuing to thicken nicely. That's come back to a boil back there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my asparagus. The asparagus is going to take a little bit longer. The asparagus is probably going to take about 2 minutes in the water. Pour those green beans in there for a second. So what I'm going to do actually, what we would do in the kitchens, is I'll take some paper towels, put that in the bottom of the dish there, give this a light squeeze as I bring it out of the ice water, and put it on the paper towels to let it start to drain. Forgot I had twisted that a little bit. So that's a nice rolling boil. That is exactly what you want to see right there when you're blanching vegetables. You want it to be nice hard boil. If not, you're just poaching them. This sauce now has about 10 minutes left before we build the lasagna. Go ahead and grab my asparagus now. Asparagus is one of those vegetables that really benefits from blanching, makes it look a lot nicer. And if you're ever grilling or sauteing asparagus, you're always going to blanch it ahead of time. Always going to blanch it ahead of time. Makes it so much easier to deal with. Gives it a much nicer color. Now the green beans are kind of a different story because green beans take a lot longer to cook. Now I will be blanching these as well, but these are probably going to take about 5 minutes a batch to blanch. So I don't know about you, but I really hate it when I go to a restaurant and they give me green beans that are pretty much uncooked. And it's supposed to be this idea that, oh yeah, of course, the green beans are supposed to be that crunchy because that's how you're supposed. No, that's not how you're supposed to eat green beans. Green beans are not supposed to be basically raw. You know, it makes them very hard to chew. So I personally like having my green beans cooked. You know, I like them to be cooked. So I definitely make sure that I cook my green beans enough. 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the size of your green beans. These are normal green beans. If you're getting something that are called haricots verts, and you probably heard that before, haricots verts, or French green beans, those really thin green beans, you can get those, and they'll cook a lot faster. But if you have the larger style green beans like I have, so you see as I continue to stir this, this is starting to look like a pretty chunky tomato sauce now. That's starting to look pretty good. So I can actually tell right now that that's about as cooked as I'm going to want that. So I'm actually going to turn the heat off on that. Tracking my time right now for my green beans. Should only take about 2 more minutes. And once we get our green beans blanched off, we'll have done all of our blanching for the time being. And I'll actually start putting together our lasagna. And then I have my my oven back here is set to about 400 degrees for our lasagna baking. to get my green beans out. Grab my whittle strainer. I'm actually going to bring my ice bath a little bit closer there. Probably another 1 minute on the green beans. So I just kind of picked one up and felt it. If it has a little bit of give to it, they're good to go. We will be cooking these again no matter what in whatever dish you do. So you don't have to cook them all the way right now. But if you give yourself a good base, which is kind of the whole point, if you give yourself a good base to where you know that your green beans are halfway cooked and already seasoned because of this water, then it makes them a lot easier to cook and a lot easier to not mess up in the long run. Oh, one more. All right, now we're going to add the last of our green beans to our pot. Now just imagine a pot about 15 times that size running in a kitchen all day, and that's usually what we have. That big old blanching pot always going for your vegetables. All right. So now, bring my tomato sauce over. And now we have all of our ingredients to make our lasagna. I'm going to keep a little mental note on my green beans back there while I start this process. So, the first thing you're going to do is add a layer of sauce. And I'm going to try not to get the pork chunks actually in this part of it, because this sauce in the bottom of the pan is basically to prevent the noodles from sticking directly to the pan. You need this as a little bit of a buffer. Ooh, smell of this sauce is delicious. Yeah, it's just green beans. Just regular green beans.
Oh, yeah. Layer it up.
So, we're going to start layering our noodles, ever so slightly overlapping as well. That's important. That's why I just moved that one there. The overlapping helps the entire thing stick together in the end. All right. So then I'm going to take some of my meatball and just kind of break it up. I want to keep it in nice large pieces so you're still knowing that you're getting part of a meatball. Now we're going to do some sausage. We're going to be doing about 3 layers of this, so try to plan accordingly for your toppings. My green beans are probably pretty close to done at this point, so I'll go ahead and pull those out. That is warm. It's funny because this is the smallest strainer I have, and it's the only one that can get into this pot really well. And now that this is actually the last blanching, I could just take the water and pour it out. You know, I was trying to save the actual blanching liquid for the other batches that we were doing, but this is the last batch for our blanching, so not that big a deal. Thank you. That's kind of that is definitely the point. We just gotta get some more people in here to see the steamy goodness of the food. All right, so next we have our meats in there. So now I'm gonna take some of our cheese mixture. And for the cheese mixture, I'm just gonna kind of dot this in here. You know, I'm not gonna smear it over the whole thing. This will melt in, you know, but it's also kind of nice to have, you know, pockets of meat, pockets of cheese. They all kind of intermingle together. All right. So then I'm going to add a little bit of the sauce in there. All right. Next. So I'm going to put this next layer of pasta on, and I'm really going to press it because I want to get one more layer in. And even if I break a little bit of it, I'm not going to worry that much. Because I am going to want to get a third layer in here. All right. Meatballs, sausage, yeah, meatballs and the sausage. Channel my inner Jersey. So I'm actually going to skip the tomato sauce in this layer, and I'm just going to do a layer of the cheese mixture and the meat, because the top is going to get a dose of tomato sauce. And this one I'm going to definitely fill this in a good amount with the cheese mixture. This one, it's almost going to be a solid layer. But like I said, everything's going to get pressed down together too. So don't worry too much about that. So then the last top layer gets pressed on there. Open up my second package. All right. So then for our final layer, we're going to top this with our meat sauce. And a pretty generous layer. It's got those little, you can have that little piece of porchetta in there. That's nice. Then, on the top, I'm going to take the last of my fresh mozzarella cheese. Yeah, I did. Yeah, these are ready to bake noodles. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have time to make my own pasta noodles today. Now, I have some of this cheese mixture. I'll probably just save this. This is a really wonderful filling for any kind of raviolis or any kind of filled pasta that you wanted to do if you wanted to make it at home. This mixture is a fantastic mixture for doing anything like that. And then I'm also going to finish this with a little bit of my Pecorino Romano. All right, so oven set to about 400 degrees. Grab my sheet tray. And I'm going to put this directly onto my sheet tray, and I'm going to bake it on my sheet tray just in case something bubbles up. This all looks nice. You see, the main thing is you want it wet, but you don't want it too wet. You know, one of the things about lasagna that I don't like is when the lasagna, when you can cut it and it can actually hold its shape. That's a good thing. Okay, you don't... well, as soon as I get a pasta roller in here, we can start working on some of that. And now I get to eat a little meatball. Dip it in the sauce. So any of this extra meat, I'll just throw right in this sauce. And then I'm going to end up cooling all this down, saving it for pasta, or whatever what you want to do with it. Let's see how much I got here. A little bit too much. Almost. I'll put it in a couple different containers. Put this in my fridge to start cooling off. I might need to wash this pot out, so I'm just trying to get this out of my pot that I'm going to be using. Give me 1 sec to wash out our pot. So we've talked about lasagna, which the main tenets of lasagna that you really need to worry about, make sure that you don't make it too wet. Make sure you reduce your tomato sauce out a good amount. Make sure you don't... Sorry. Make sure you don't... Make sure you follow the directions on your actual pastas packet, like he was saying, because I use the stuff that's already ready to go. But like I said, if you want to go ahead and par cook your pasta, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I do it. I usually actually make fresh pasta in the restaurant to do this with, but all right. So while that's cooking, we're going to be making a bechamel. So in French cuisine, there are mother sauces. Mother sauces, and there's 4 of them technically. Mother sauces are the basis for all other sauces. So when Escoffier came up with the idea of French cuisine, one of his ideas was, well, we'll have these mother sauces, and from these sauces you can make just about anything. And a white sauce, or bechamel sauce, is one of the mother sauces. So, what is a bechamel? A bechamel is essentially milk, butter, and flour cooked together until it's a sauce-like consistency, okay? So the way to make a bechamel, the traditional way, actually uses onion and fresh bay leaf as well. So we will be doing that. As soon as I clean off my little space back here. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is dice up a little onion because we're building that flavor, and we need our base of operations, and that base of operations is an onion. I'm going to save half of my onion because I only need I'm only going to make a little bit of bechamel, so I'm only going to need 1 onion for this dish, or half an onion for this dish rather. So I take my half an onion and I'm going to dice it relatively finely, not too fine. It's going to get strained out later, so not a big deal. If you don't want to dice it too finely, or else it'll actually cook in too much of the sauce and you won't get that nice consistency at the end. So just half an onion. And I'm trying to think about actually how much bechamel I'm going to make, and I think actually this pot over here is the better pot for it. Alright, so let's get our mise en place together. We are going to need the onion, the bay leaf, the flour, which of course when I put stuff back in here I can never find it. Where'd my bay leaves go? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Oh, bay leaves. Oh, they're there. Okay, so bay leaves, onion, butter, butter, flour, and milk. So, when making a bechamel, one of the easier ways to get it absolutely correct is to go by weight. So we're going to do 1 ounce of butter per 1 ounce of flour thickens 1 cup of liquid, okay? So I'm going to make probably about 4 cups of bechamel. So I want about 4 ounces of butter. And the easiest way, now I know that this whole stick is 4 ounces, okay, because it says 4 ounces on there. So I can just throw this stick in and let this butter start to melt on medium-low heat, okay? Now on here, I'm going to weigh out my flour. So I'll just get a measuring cup, turn on my scale here, put it to ounces, and pour in 4 ounces of flour, which should be about this cup. Yep, pretty close. All right. And then that's going to be getting a quarter or a quart of milk. Now, we're going to be melting the butter and we're going to be cooking the onion with the butter for a little while before we actually add the flour. So that's going to start developing that flavor, and we're also going to be adding our bay leaf into this. So I'll take 2 bay leaves, give them a little tear, throw them in there, and we're going to start that process of sauteing it. Now back here, I'm going to go ahead and store my beautifully blanched green vegetables here for our later enjoyment. All right. Go ahead and pop this guy in here, grab myself a water, because I've been talking for a couple hours. All right. Get this going about medium heat. And then I'm going to measure out, when I say measure, I mean approximate. So that's about what we're going to need for our bechamel. Now, to make the process of making the bechamel easier, I am going to heat this milk up lightly. You don't have to bring it to a boil. Let me tell you something. Sometimes you got to go cheaper than Perrier. Sometimes you got to go cheaper. Till we start getting subs and get people watching more, I gotta live cheap. But so when you're mixing and actually making the bechamel, it's much better to have the liquid that you put into it, the milk, actually be a little bit warm. It actually makes it a lot easier to work with and takes a lot less time to make. So oh, the stove. Yeah, that's good stuff. Hey man, we take what we can get, right? So the lasagna is probably going to take about um, 30 to 45 minutes in the oven, and then you actually need to let it rest for about 30 minutes. So we'll pull it out probably about 9:15, 9:30. But once again, I'm just keeping my eye on it. I'm not going to know exactly. I'm not going to know exactly the time, but I do know exactly what I want it to look like. By the time that top gets real golden brown, I actually just turn that down to 375. Sometimes I have to listen to the little inner voice in my head that tells me to do things. Sometimes it says, turn the temperature down. Get my whisk out. Take this time to clean my stove off a little bit because all the tomato sauce splattered everywhere. All right. Everything's a little bit cleaner now. So I'm not going to sweat this onion for very long. I'm basically just trying to get it to come up to a little bit of a simmer with the butter. And then we're going to add in the flour and start cooking everything, because by the time the bechamel gets done cooking, the onions will have released what flavor I want in there. And like I said, we will eventually be straining it out. So now this cheese mixture. I'm actually going to take some. I have these little plastic ramekin cups from work. So I'm actually just going to fill these little ramekins up, and then I'll just freeze these little ramekins of this cheese mixture. Today has not been a popular stream. No. This is one of those days where you're like, oh.
What am I doing? Nobody cares.
Nobody. Well, Force Dragon cares. Force Dragon's the person in here just watching me cook. Love him for it. All right. So, milk's starting to heat up over here. Butter, onions, and bay leaf over here. Once I start to see this start to simmer, I'm going to give it about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to add my flour to it. I know, right? Hey, you're getting like, it's funny because I do private cooking instruction. I do private cooking classes, and generally it's about $50 an hour. So, yeah, you're getting the goodness right now. All right, so now this has come to a simmer. Onions are starting to get a little translucent. I'm gonna go ahead and add my flour in. We're gonna stir the flour in, and this is gonna start to turn into a little bit of a paste. All right. So now we're just going to start to cook this paste a little bit. And you're going to see it's actually going to release out a little bit as it starts to cook. When I first add it, it's going to look a little lumpy, but it's going to start to melt, and it's going to form its own little paste. Now, the cool thing about learning something like this is a good opportunity to learn about making roux. So a roux is flour and butter mixed together, cooked, and then that is used to thicken different liquids. Now, the thickening power of a roux very much depends on what color the roux is and how long it's been cooked. So the longer you cook a roux, the least thickening power it's going to have, the less. Okay, so the longer you cook it, the darker it's going to get and the less thickening power it has. It's never going to have more thickening power than in its kind of raw stage, which is kind of like right now. So we're going to be taking this to what in French cuisine they call a blonde stage roux. Okay, so a blonde stage roux is actually a roux that's been cooked long enough to where it's going to slightly turn blonde, and then it, roux from there go on in a very logical way to where you're going to have a blonde roux, a brown roux, and usually, I mean, I just call it a dark roux or a dark brown roux, but dark roux, what they're used for more than anything is for making things like gumbo in Creole cuisine. Okay, so very popular in Creole cuisine, gumbo. That's how you make it, is you make this really dark roux, which also helps give the entirety of the dish that kind of roasted, floury, like you don't notice it, but it's one of the main flavor profiles of gumbo is that really dark brown roux. You know, it's like brown butter roux almost. So you can see this is starting to loosen up a little bit. There's sauce. I have no idea what that was. Saw something sticking out of it. Check on my lasagna just to make sure. Now, the thing about lasagna too is you don't want your lasagna to be wet, like I've talked about. So when I'm looking at it, I'm making sure that it doesn't look too wet and that it's also not getting too dark in color. But judging by time, it's been about 20 minutes, so we probably got about another 15 to 20 minutes to go. So to get the roux to the blonde stage, which it's kind of hard to see on camera, but it is starting to get lighter in color. Takes probably about 5 or 6 minutes on medium heat cooking it nice, consistently, stirring it, not letting it burn. You definitely want to keep the heat at about medium or medium low because you do not want to get color on this because it is called a white sauce. All right. And if it's a white sauce, then you want it to be white, not to be racist. Sure, black sauces are great too. And actually, oddly enough, one of the other classic mother sauces is actually called brown sauce or sauce espagnole. It's based off of demi-glace. All right, so at this point, my milk is a little bit warm, which is good. Like I said, you don't need your milk boiling hot, okay? It's not absolutely necessary for it to be boiling hot. However, if you were to pour cold liquid in here, it's much harder to get the lumps out of it, okay? So by adding a warmer liquid, you're actually going to make it a smoother sauce. It's one of the other good parts of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and in one solid addition, just go ahead and add all of my milk in. And then I'm just going to start stirring. Now, when I'm making sauces like bechamel that are flour thickened, one of the things that can happen in your pot is that you can have it stick to the bottom and it can start burning on the bottom and you get these brown flecks in your bechamel. The way to prevent that is a lower temperature or making sure you're stirring it very consistently. And when I stir it, you see I take the whisk and I hit the edges of it. I'll stir in the middle and then I'll stir the edges. All right. Now there is one other flavoring agent for bechamels that is very classic that I was told that we have in our house. I maybe should have checked beforehand. But it's ground nutmeg. And I thought we had... I got so many spices. Am I going to find it? Am I going to find it? Maybe? No? Almost? Could be? Possibly? Is it? Could it be? All right. So I found it. That took a second. It's ground, but that's fine. Because you're only going to get a very little bit of the ground nutmeg. Ground nutmeg, very powerful stuff. All right. So you only need about half of a teaspoon in there. Now, this will not fully thicken until it comes to a boil. Once something that has a roux thickens, it's when it actually comes fully to a boil. If you were thickening something with cornstarch, cornstarch can thicken below a boil, but not a roux. So you have to wait for this to actually come to a full boil. Now, one thing I am going to need is I'm going to need my large strainer. Oh, this strainer is plenty big. And I'm actually going to get that little pot that I was heating my milk up in ready, because I'll actually strain the sauce into that pot, and then we can talk a little bit about what you could do with the bechamel once it's made. Oh, Force Dragon, I don't know if you noticed, but on my stream at the bottom, there's a new Discord link. If you click on it, it has an instant invite from my new Discord. I'm still working on populating it and stuff, but it's there in case you wanted to try to visit it. All right, so this is starting to get quite thick, but that is what we're looking for. And it's almost hit a boil, because as soon as I see it starting to bubble, I'll know it's done. And actually, I have my little instant read thermometer. Yeah, share all your pictures of your food there. I'll start sharing mine. I mean, I'll be on there pretty much all the time. So I'm going to start using it to post recipes and everything. So that's going to be where I post pretty much everything is in my Discord. I figured that's about what you're supposed to do. So, all right, so coming back over here. You see this is thickened into a nice gravy, right? Good way to check is if you can swipe it and it holds the back of a spoon like that. That's called napant. Okay, and that means that the sauce is pretty much ready to go. I'm seeing a little bit of boiling starting to happen, and you don't have to boil it for long. Once it comes to a boil, the sauce is ready. Now this one looks like I might have measured out just a little bit too much in terms of milk. So if you do make one that you feel is maybe a little bit too thick, or if you wanted, there's different reasons to have thinner and thicker bechamels, but you can always add a touch of liquid to it. Yeah, see, that's starting to look, that right there looks good. So I grab my strainer, and I want to strain out all of the onion and bay leaf. I just kind of stir this in the strainer to get it all out. Give it a little tap. go ahead and get rid of this. So now that we have our bechamel, you might be asking yourself, well, what can we do with it? So the things that you do with bechamel that are very tasty generally involve pastas, vegetables. It's actually a very popular thing to use for lasagna. If you are making a vegetable lasagna. Wow, my mind just blanked for a second. All right. So I can see that our lasagna is done. It actually took about 35 minutes. That's about right, because like I said, everything's in there is cooked. You're not trying to get anything else out of it except for flavor and get everything to marry and cook together and to cook the pasta. Ooh, look at that. So this is definitely, I'm actually going to just move everything over here and bring this bad boy over here. Beautiful. Now the best part about lasagna to me is these little crispity crunchy edges. So I always try to make sure I kind of, this is funny, I make sure I leave a little bit of those edges exposed. So you get those little corner crunchy parts. I love them. So back to bechamel. Things you could do with the bechamel. Mac and cheese. If you're ever making macaroni and cheese and you want to do it from scratch, this is what you will use for it. And because I made this today, I'm actually going to make a mac and cheese probably on Thursday with this bechamel sauce. Since we haven't made already, we'll probably plan on doing that. Other things you can do with bechamel sauce, there's different things that are very interesting that you can do with it. Like the French will use it as a base sauce to do many different things. One of them is to make different kinds of cheese sauces. So like Mornay sauce is a bechamel sauce that's been flavored with Gruyere cheese. You know, so there's a lot of different derivations. I think that's the word. There's a lot of different derivations for bechamel that I love crispy pasta that you can use. So always important to remember. I'm gonna take this whole piece of pork. Oh, it's so good. So that's done. Done. Now, one thing I want to show you, because quite frankly, I need to get some vegetables in my life. Show you just the most basic way to make delicious vegetables. So we've blanched our vegetables now. So you say, well, now that I blanched my vegetables, what am I supposed to do with them? We're just going to make some asparagus with white wine and butter and caramelized onions, because I have some caramelized onions left over. So why not? There are kind of basic tenets, I guess, of making things taste good. Butter, salt, and acidity. If you do those three things in any shape or form, you will get yourself a good result. So say I wanted to do, like I said, we'll do a little bit of just a real basic asparagus with a pan sauce of white wine and butter. Oh, that's the one. So I have my pan going on high over here. And I'm not going to start with butter in this, okay, because I want to actually sear my asparagus a little bit first. Get a little roasted flavor on it, because asparagus loves that roasted flavor. Like, you know, I'm sure if you're like me and you have asparagus when you roast it in the oven, you love to get it that little crispiness, and it has that roasted quality. It really benefits asparagus. So we will be pan searing the asparagus first, then I'll be deglazing it with a little bit of white wine. And then hitting it with our butter and lemon juice at the end. Maybe not lemon juice because I don't know if, oh, nope, I do. Fantastic. So yeah, we'll do our butter and lemon juice and white wine. And all those flavors give you a really beautiful flavor. So you can see this is starting to deflate a little bit, which is the whole idea. Everything's kind of pressing down on itself. That's why you want it to let it rest, all right? You want to let it continue to naturally cool down, and as it cools down, the pasta will actually start to help to stick everything together too. This is going to take a couple minutes to heat up. Another really simple and wonderful thing you can do with bechamel is actually, if you ever want to, like they will bake a lot of their vegetables with a little bit of bechamel on top of the vegetables, because the bechamel, because of the flour in it, will actually brown. And especially if you put a little bit of cheese in it, it will brown even better. And so you'll get a nice brown, creamy crust on top of like asparagus. So hey, screw it, let's make some. I'm going to throw my oven onto about 450. It's going to be nice and hot. Fortunately, I have this cool little roasting pan here that I can use. So I have my blanched asparagus. I'm just going to put that right there. That eye's still a little hot. So then, what I'll do is I haven't seasoned my bechamel yet, so I will add, just because I'm actually going to be using it in something now, I will add a little bit of salt to it. No pepper, because I want to keep it nice and white. So then what you do is you just take some of your bechamel and you pour that right on top of your asparagus. And then you could take a little bit, say, of your pecorino cheese right here. Just kind of drizzle the whole thing with pecorino cheese. Maybe put just a little squeeze of lemon in the bottom of it, just to let it kind of cook from the bottom. And I'm going to let my, and actually, even better, I don't even know why I didn't even think of this, we're actually going to broil this. So because everything is pretty much cooked, I'm actually going to get this really hot on the broil, and we're going to do it that way. It's really nice when you have some nice broiled bechamel asparagus. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is grab the other asparagus and do the little pan sauce with it. We'll do asparagus a couple different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and add my asparagus in. It's going to start to sizzle and pop. And we're just going to let it start to brown on one side. We're going to try not to move it very much. I am going to bring my butter, lemon, and white wine over here. And like I said, we also have some of these caramelized onions left over, which are really beautiful. So I'm actually just going to use them in our sauce as well. Alright, so now we're going to give this a little shake. Starting to get a little roasty color. I'm going to go ahead and add in my caramelized onions. Alright, so now that we got the asparagus seared a little bit, we've got our caramelized onions in the pan with it. Now we're going to add our butter in. And the butter is going to act as an emulsifier with the white wine and lemon juice. And then we're just going to cook it all for just a minute, just to combine and marry those flavors. If you had some fresh tomato you wanted to throw in here, that'd be really beautiful too. So then the last thing we finish with is our lemon juice. Just for some freshness. And you come over here, put a nice little mound of your asparagus, a little bit of that caramelized onion right there. Beautiful. So now I'm going to take my asparagus with the bechamel and we're going to broil that real quick. And we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up the stream. I want to cut on this lasagna so bad, but I know it needs another 10 or 15 minutes to rest. All right, so let's find some containers for things, huh? So we're finishing up the stream right now, but we did our beautiful lasagna over here, which I will try to cut into and just see if I can get a piece out just to show you guys. Oh yeah, beautiful. Move that over. Let's see how we did. All right, came out nice and clean. Look at that. Look at that. If that isn't enough to get me a follow from somebody who just came in, nothing will. And you can see it holds itself together very nicely. Yeah, that one was pretty good looking. All right. So now you can see that asparagus with the bechamel. You see it's really nice how it gets that beautiful, like it doesn't run anywhere because it has that flour in the sauce. It gets that beautiful crust on it with the Parmesan cheese. Actually, that was pecorino cheese right there. So today, as a quick review, we learned about our lasagna, learned about the process behind making that. We learned about blanching, which was a very useful lesson if you ever want to properly cook vegetables. And then we finished it off with our lesson about bechamel. And in my Discord channel, I'll start posting some ideas about how you can use bechamel as well. But tonight, though, it's going to be a little bit shorter stream, only 2.5 hours. I will be here on Thursday. I am not sure what we're doing yet, but I should have my Discord up and running. I have 2 videos uploading right now to YouTube and to my Twitch channel, so please be on the lookout for those. And aside from that, I hope you enjoyed it. Force Dragon, you're the best. I know you've been around the whole time. I greatly appreciate it, but I am going to go enjoy my lasagna and asparagus, and I bid you all a fantastic night. Okay, cool. I'll do that tonight. Hopefully we can get some more people on Thursday. You know, it's all good. Start small. The revolution begins. I will do. Force Dragon, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you soon.